You're listening to China Africa Talk.
Jambo, ni Bridget akikuletea kipindi kinachohusiana na China na Afrika.
Vous écoutez le dialogue sino-africain avec Bridget.
Everything China, everything Africa.
Olá, você está ouvindo China Africa Talk com Bridget.
سيداتي وسادتي مرحبا بكم في الحوار الصيني العربي مع بريدجيت.
June the 5th marks World Environment Day, an annual call for global environmental protections. This year, under the theme Beat Plastic Pollution, the campaign spotlights the urgent need to tackle the devastating impacts of plastic waste on ecosystems and health. China and Africa are not immune to the crisis. Experts Ma Jun and Ali Said Matano point out plastic pollution has become a growing environmental and public concern on both continents.
Microplastic in recent years have been found in sampled low-level creatures and freshwater creatures and ocean creatures.
We are consumers of fish, and fish is the one that can be affected by microplastics.
Like many countries around the world, China and African countries are advancing national strategies to curb plastic waste. But what challenges remain, and beyond domestic efforts, how can China and Africa strengthen cooperation on plastic pollution prevention? To delve further into our discussion, I'm now joined by Ma Jun, founding director of the Institute for Public and Environmental Affairs, and Ali Said Matano, senior advisor, Blue Economy and Lakefront Development, and executive director for the Africa Center for Health, Environment and Water Services. Gentlemen, it's great to have you on the program.
Yeah, most welcome.
I'll begin with you there, Mr. Ma. Plastic pollution, including microplastics, has become a critical environmental and public health issue globally. What impacts have you observed in China, both on ecosystems and human well-being?
Sure. As the largest producer and consumer country of plastic, we have experienced the impact from plastic and microplastic pollution in China. It presents a profound environmental and public health challenges with impacts observed across ecosystems and also on the human well-beings. We first noticed that plastic waste is still a big challenge. And we have observed that plastic accounts for around 90% of the floating debris and from 60% to 90% of the seabed debris in China's coastal zones. Mm-hmm. And major rivers like the Yangtze River transport over 1 million tons of plastic to the ocean annually. So, that we notice. And obviously, microplastic in recent years have been found in sampled low-level creatures and freshwater creatures and ocean creatures. And 30% of the fish also contains some microplastics. And it also contaminated soil and even discovered in the airborne deposition as well. So, of course, when microplastics have been discovered in tap water, food, all this have aroused public concerns, although the actual health impact on human beings are still being studied at this moment.
When you look at it, the cycle goes on. Once the fish are contaminated, it probably also has an effect also on humans when we eventually eat those fish.
Yeah, there's no escape. Yeah. Now it's in the food, water, even in the air. There's no escape from the microplastics. As I mentioned, some research have confirmed the impact on some of the low-level creatures, like some mollusks, but the human health impact is still up to further research. Having said that, all these uncertainties, all these risks generated by microplastics, which has been dubbed by some scientists as the PM2.5 in the water, because it can also absorb and concentrate some of the toxic substances and carry that into the bodies of both animals and also human beings. So these huge uncertainties and potential risks cannot be addressed without cutting the plastic pollution from the very source.
How about the situation in Kenya, Dr. Matano? What impacts have you observed in Kenya, both on the ecosystems and human well-being?
Basically on land, like my brother has said, plastics actually affect soil structure. affecting its soil facilities and even hence productivity. And here we also have livestock, especially in Kenya. The northern part of Kenya, there is a lot of livestock. And because of plastic, we have seen that these livestock ingest plastic. Actually, a number of them, we have had lethal effects in terms of death of livestock. And on human, of course, again, borrowing from what Maha said, we are consumers of fish. And fish is the one that can be affected by microplastics. And this is because of what we call bioaccumulation of this microplastic. And they actually go through the food chain, as has been well alluded by Ma. And this has, of course, the potential of exposing our bodies to carcinogenic, and that's why the instances of cancer have really risen. In fact, studies are showing also there is a correlation between the microplastic and the rise in cancer. Of course, burning of this plastic also has been found to be very lethal because of the toxic fumes that lead to respiratory diseases. So really, we are living within plastics, but the effect is more than, the advantages that we are getting from them.
It's such a wonderful material. When you think about like just a cucumber, you need it to be wrapped up in plastic for it to, to last long. It's quite scary actually to think of the effects. In China, how has public and industry perception of plastics changed over the past decade? And have you noticed a cultural shift regarding awareness and responsibility, Mr. Ma?
Yes, plastic used to be considered as an innovation, not really, benefit the people. It's so convenient to use plastic, and it does have some of the features that people quite like. But in more recent years, there has been a shift of public opinion from 20 years ago. First, it was about the exposure of all this white pollution, plastic packaging, littered all over, a lot more in the countryside. So it's along the road and along the rivers. So people really feel a bit shocked by that. So that's the first round. And then in response to that, the government started creating policy to restrict the single-use plastic. But in more recent years, with a much better understanding of the profound impact of plastics on the environment and ecosystem, and particularly on the ocean and ocean creatures, and with the shocking discovery of the potential health impact from the microplastic, a lot more people rethink about the use of plastics. So with that, China have created basically very powerful policy. First, a policy in 2017, basically to ban waste import, including the plastic waste. And this has triggered an industry-wide disruption because China is not only the largest producer of the virgin plastic, but also it was by far the largest importer for all this recycling process. And that has completely disrupted the whole value chain, and then created a policy to upgrade the plastic restriction policy to a plastic ban policy, which targeting single-use plastics, mandating a 30% reduction in non-degradable packaging by this year, 2025, and then try to move the industry from a linear use of production and use of the plastic to a circular economy. So with all of this, the industry is trying to respond and try to catch up with that. But it is quite challenging because China is the largest producer and consumer, account for 30% of the global output of plastic. So there's a major effort made, for example, to try to make it more biodegradable and to create extended producer responsibilities and all of this. With all these efforts, China's plastic output started going down from over the past 5 years.
Yeah, because I also noticed, I came here more than 10 years ago, and I noticed now when you go to the restaurants, they're making use of paper straws, even the packaging, a lot of it is paper packaging. Don't see many plastic straws and packaging in the restaurants.
Yes, that's a result of the banning of the single-use plastic policy.
And the supermarkets as well. Dr. Matano, how's the situation in Kenya? I know the media has played an important role in raising awareness of the dangers of plastic pollution. In Kenya, do you see public understanding and attitudes towards plastic use evolving?
Indeed, the media has really been key. Firstly, by supporting the advocacy for plastic ban across the region, not just in Kenya, but across East Africa. And in Kenya in particular, when the first legislative framework on the ban of plastic in 2017 was actually passed, the media was very supportive of this. And just like in China, here in Kenya, probably at micro level, all the sectors and the business in the use of single-use plastic was very high. And therefore, when there was an initiative to have plastic ban in the country, people could not believe that they could live without plastics.
Most of the time when media raises these awareness campaigns, for the general public, it's like, wow, you're scaring us. Don't say that.
It was similar here, and therefore the media has really done a lot of work in terms of creating awareness. The various legislative instruments that the government has put in place, and there is definitely an incredible understanding of the public. And if also the government, both, of course, Kenya, we have a both form of government, both the national and county government, have also enhanced enforcement in terms of the usage and also illegal inputs, and also trying to advocate for incentive to alternative uses of plastic. But indeed, I would say that the media has actually been in the forefront of the fight against plastic, despite the huge challenges from multinational companies who are actually beneficiaries of the plastic. At the moment in Kenya, arising from the ban that was introduced for a single plastic ban use in 2017, and recently in 2020 again the government legislated and passed a ban on use of now plastic, not just single plastic bags but plastic in general. And therefore, if you compare the time when we had no ban on plastic and the current situation now, there is a huge difference. But I would say we are not yet there, because still there are things that I see, like as I told you, in the environment that I am in, you can see plastic. There are certain sectors that plastic is inevitable, but we will come to that and look at the legislation that is there to control such. But the basic use of single-use plastic, especially at the local level, was massive. You could walk, you could see every area is clogged. Now, what we have now to deal with in Kenya are mainly now the containers, the bottles, the plastic bottles, the containers that are being used for various products, especially the branded ones. But indeed, in terms of awareness, I think, and the people have accepted that now it is time to live without plastic. We start with the mindset. And indeed, once the mindset of people are able to appreciate that though plastics are good, are aesthetically beautiful, but the impact they are having on the environment is massive, then there'll be a shift in the usage of this lethal material that we are talking about.
Mr. Ma, China's 14th five-year plan of actions for plastic pollution control reflects growing national commitment to tackling plastic waste. Now, in your view, how critical is local level action in supporting national targets, and what challenges remain in overcoming industrial resistance or regulatory gaps?
As we talked about the 14th five-year plan, it started with this upgraded plastic ban, which have already forced food and beverage and retail sectors to adopt alternatives, as you have observed, to use bamboo or paper straws. And 2023, during the 14th five-year plan, policy have been established to create an extended producer responsibility. And 2025, this year, it was the deadline for the single-use plastic products to be phased out. So with all of these targets, we're talking about billions of consumers need to be made aware of all this policy and change their behavior. So local actions need to support this national policy. So the 14th five-year plan specifically have demanded for the establishment in China of a garbage sorting system within major cities.
Oh, yes. You find one that is blue and one is black and then the other one is green. Yes.
4 colors. The green for kitchen waste
Yes.
and red for toxic waste.
And it's taken pretty seriously. The caretakers, when they're cleaning up the compounds, and a lot of people are in a rush to catch the subway or catch a bus, and people throw their trash in the wrong trash can. And the caretakers will call you back and they're like, come back. The caretakers are saying, no, you need to put your trash into the right trash can. If it's going to be recyclable, you need to put it in there. You need to put it into the wrong trash can.
And that's a serious transformation.
I found that to be very effective, actually.
Yeah, that's right. And throughout the world, actually, there are only a few countries and regions that have created such a kind of a world-class garbage sorting system. I would say it's already being built all across China, but some of the leading cities like Suzhou and Shanghai. And they reached the level of those cities in Japan, the real pioneers in garbage sorting. And then in cities like Beijing, not all the citizens have been fully on board, but the government have created a policy. If the neighborhood fail to ensure that all the garbage are sorted out properly, they will not be transported. It's quite a behavior change effort, which is fundamental. To China, it's critical because all the national context of all these limitations in other kind of resources, it is expected for plastic to continue to be used in some way. So that means we have to build a world-class recycling program to ensure that there will be no leakage of all this plastic pollution. So far, real success has been made on the PET type of bottles, which have higher values. The recycling rate is found to be over 90%. But when it comes to low value-added plastics, such as the packaging for meal box and online shopping and all of this, the recycling rate is still way too low. So that's the direction that we need to move to. And last but not least, we need the policy, the law, and also the public awareness to create all this pressure to overcome the resistance from the industries.
Dr. Matano, back to the issue of regulations on plastic packaging. In Kenya, the National Environment Management Authority, NEMA, is implementing new regulations on plastic packaging. I caught wind of that when I was preparing my script there. Could you share insights into the country's legislative progress and what barriers have been encountered and what successes have been achieved so far?
Indeed, I think you are right, because the National Environment Management Authority is the one that is tasked with the implementation of various regulations that manage environment in general. But there are specific legislation or regulations that have been developed with respect to how plastic packaging is concerned, among others. And recently, of course, we had the regulation on the use of plastic garbage bags and liners. This was actually enacted recently in 2024 for organic waste collection mainly. And you do appreciate the fact that in Kenya, most of the garbage collection and management is done by private funds. Therefore, there was need to come up with a regulation that would actually manage, especially that would guide the management on how these garbage collectors undertake their job. And within this regulation, it does require that all households, institutions, and even events must have their garbage in 100% biodegradable bags. You don't go with the plastic bag, and it's already in implementation. The other regulation that perhaps I would want to mention about is what Ma has talked about segregation of, but here we focus mainly on non-hazardous waste, which we do segregate into organic and non-organic fractions. And this is basically in line with the Sustainable Management Act that was signed or was enacted in 2022. And therefore, this requires that when, especially it goes back again to the major stakeholders in this, and these are private sector garbage collectors, that even when they are collecting the garbages from homesteads, from institutions, or from any events, they ensure that that garbage is segregated into both organic and non-organic. Of course, at the level of hospitals, that is where now you get segregation of hazardous waste, like Ma has talked about. And of course, the government did develop some other regulations on extended producers' responsibility. This regulation was actually enacted in 2024. And this regulation it is the onus of the producer for the life cycle of their products, including post-consumer waste management. Like, as I was telling you, Coca-Cola, for example, with their drinks, it is the onus of Coca-Cola to ensure the life cycle of their product, including even after a post-consumer. The good thing is that they have branded their bottles very well. So if they are found, for example, in water bodies, they are actually held responsible for that. And I think this particular extended producers' responsibility regulation is very important because it makes everybody accountable. The producer, the user, and the every. So this has actually been very effective in regulating most of these plastics. Now, in terms of the progress that has been made in terms of legislation, development of legislation, now I would want to say that in Kenya, particularly within the region, I think Kenya has done very well because they were the first one, including Rwanda. Kenya and Rwanda, they have always moved in par in terms of implementation of environmental regulations. And here, of course, the role of legislating or developing laws and policies, the onus is on Parliament. But the Parliament has actually been able to enact three key important legislative instruments that I've talked about, like the 2017 ban on single plastic carrier bag. This was the first legislation that was came, and it faced a lot of challenges, of course, because within the region, most countries did not want to get rid of plastic because of the economic benefits that they were getting from it. So the approach in Kenya was that we look at both at the national legislation and also try to regulate or to advocate for a regional sort of framework that would ensure members within the East African community also adhere to that particular ban. And at the moment, I think some very good progress has been done because Uganda is trying to do that, and also is Tanzania. But again, there was also this legislation that I talked about, the 2020 ban on single-use plastic now generally, especially in the protected areas, because like our national parks, we receive a lot of visitors and what have you. And that was actually another place of disposal of plastic. You get plastic bottles and all these things that are being used. And therefore, that ban was placed. And this was easy to implement because the owners of that is also placed on the tourist companies. If you are bringing visitors, you must ensure that the visitors have actually disposable bags. They don't also go throwing the bags in a national park or in a whatever. So this has also been very, very effective. But again, as I said, the most important one is this one that I talked, that was enacted here and adopted in Kenya on the extended producer's responsibility. We call it EPR, where the owners, of course, on the branders, on the importers, the producers, and the managers. But this has not been without challenges. And we have heard the implementation of this legislation has actually been the main challenge. Although actually in the initial, even legislating for those regulations here in Kenya, it was very difficult because it was like our against activists who are pro-plastic vis-a-vis the multinationals.
It becomes more of a war, rather than people actually understanding what's going on.
Yes, a war in quote. And of course, the multinational companies have the muscle power. They have the financial power. But now the main challenge that we have at the moment is in terms of implementation of this legislation. And one of the key challenges is actually smuggling across borders. But in Uganda, they are still using plastic. If you go to Ethiopia, they are doing the same. We also share our border with the Somali. They are doing that. So there is a lot of infusion of illegal plastic getting into the country. And as I said, the strategy here is to make sure these other countries,
the region, make it a regional issue.
Yes, actually, they are actually members of the East African community. The implementation is in process, but it is gradual. But we can already see the fruits, especially in Kenya. And the challenge, as I said, is this inter-country smuggling across the borders.
Mr. Ma, beyond domestic efforts, how can China and African countries collaborate more closely on plastic pollution prevention, for example, through technology transfer, recycling innovations, or joint research?
Yeah, absolutely. By listening to the description by Dr. Matano, I've already learned so much about all the efforts made in Kenya and in the other countries in Africa. I found that there are more similarities. We're both facing all the challenges posed by plastic waste and plastic pollution. And we both are having our public community gaining higher awareness on the impact of the plastic. And that has triggered changing policy and laws. But the implementation now poses a bigger challenge, legislation. So that's quite similar in China and in African countries. And with that, China as the largest user and consumer of plastic, and also China has been using plastic earlier and more extensively. So with that, some of the impact are bigger here, or materialized earlier in China.
Okay.
So some of the solutions are also being explored earlier. So with that, I think there are opportunities for, of course, first and foremost, for both Africa and China to compare notes on all these solutions and technology innovations and R&D, and to have an exchange of that. Of course, some of the technologies, China has certain technologies that can be transferred if it is found practical to be adopted in Africa, then it can be transferred. And of course, in the meantime, we can also learn the solutions developed in Kenya and in other African countries. And in the meantime, all these solutions, sometimes much of that will depend on the development of infrastructure. With that, China can provide some support on that. I hear that African countries are also trying to build their own EPR systems, the extended producer responsibility systems. Maybe we can jointly try to develop some research labs on that, and to make sure that industry, particularly the investors and companies from China, investors, to ensure that they will adopt the best practice, that they are held accountable and try to, of course, transfer this locally. And joint research and innovation and capacity building. I've been invited to attend some of the symposiums. China invited the environmental agency officers, different parts of the world, including Africa, to share some of the solutions and best practices, to discuss the challenges and also solutions. So the south to south plastic collaboration, there's a need for us to do something on that. And last but not least, since we are creating a blue map database in China, we have created a plastic map, a garbage sorting map. Our users, through crowdsourcing, our app users have helped us to check the performance of 110,000 neighborhoods on their garbage sorting. And then they take pictures, they fill out the questionnaires to advocate and motivate recycling program. And I hope that there will be chance for all this mapping to be created between China and Africa to try to prevent all the plastic leakage, identify the hot spots, prevent the leakage.
That's a good idea there. I just want to know, both of you are environmentalists. You work with the environment and you protect the environment. I'm just curious to know, in your daily life, actions that you've adopted to cut back on plastics. Maybe we'll start with you there, Dr. Matano, just to wind up our discussion.
Okay, thank you so much. As environmentalists, sometimes we tend to think globally and we don't act locally, and therefore it is important that you hold us responsible.
Yes.
And I think at the individual level, that action that we are taking at the local level is simply to reduce use of single plastic. Say no to single plastic. I think that's the first thing. And that one you can say it authoritatively because you have the permission to say so.
Yes.
And often we have said that and even advocated for sorting out plastic bags even at household level. Then the other thing is to switching to alternatives. Like I have for many years been working to ensure that we get rid of water hyacinth in Lake Victoria. And therefore, if I say people who are developing, packaging material using water hyacinth, I'm in the forefront of promoting them because I know that is going to move us a mile from usage of this plastic. And then also, of course, there is the use of other materials made from sisal, cotton, and even fiber. And then the third issue that we are doing at a local level is the reuse and repurposing. As I told you, in my small place where I'm having this meeting, I can see plastic. And my thinking is like, for example, the plastic tin that can actually be used as a for planting trees, or planting something, doing it as a planting pot. And so a lot of this has actually been done. You find that even plastic bottles, as I've told you, people are actually using it innovatively.
I've seen people constructing houses with plastic bottles.
Yes, even with plastic bottles, yes. So that is a way of reducing that. But most importantly, we also have to use our knowledge to educate, and we also do a bit of advocacy. Very few people know about plastic.
Yes.
And how do you say that a plastic is going to get into the bloodstream of a person? So that connectivity lacks, and this can only be done through trying to educate people at a very low level, at primary level, not just focusing at the university level, but the young people knowing what is the impact, and the problem can be surmounted in a very short while.
Mr. Ma, I'd like to know your daily routine to cut back on plastic.
Thank you, Bridget. I really admire all the creative practices Dr. Matano have conducted. And as for me, I also try to adopt some of the more eco-friendly practices. One of that is carry my own bottles.
The non-plastic bottles, just to be clear.
Yeah, those carry-on bottles getting more popular in China.
Yes.
And then during my trip, I try to carry my own toothbrush and combs and things like that, using the single-use plastic products in the hotel. If plastic bottle or plastic bags kind of being consumed, then I will try my best to try to reuse that.
Reuse it,
The more you reuse that, the less footprint it will make on our planet. And as I mentioned, the plastic, they do have the feature of being highly durable. So it can be used over and over again so as to reduce the footprint. One of the special activities I will conduct is every day, I try to take my own pictures, along with my app users. Because our app have created functions to help the app users to understand, by cutting the use of plastic, how much carbon footprint they could reduce through the efforts. So I think it's quite important to eventually mobilize public participation, which can lead to a real behavior change, which is most difficult but most critical.
I'm going to pick all of your ideas for my personal use there. I've been doing I've been using too much plastic. Now I'm going to be trying most of your ideas there. Mr. Majun and Dr. Matano, thank you so much there for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you for your attention. And Bridget, it's never too late to get started. Your attention to all these environmental issues, challenges, and solutions already a big contribution. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Listeners, you can subscribe to our online newsletter on CGTN or Substack to get more insights on China-Africa relations. Just search China-Africa Talk. For now, it's goodbye. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others. Post it on social media or leave a rating and review. Thanks again. See you next time.